Good morning, everybody. Here we are again. Everybody wave, wave. There we go. Everybody's more or less alive. That's great. Um, in a second, I think our tech folks will show the cover from the order of service of September 27th, 1992. And you remember that I'm more or less repeating two sermons that I delivered 28 years ago. And I just want to comment that, one of the things that we're missing in this pandemic affair is to be able to look at the covers of orders of service. And so much effort has gone into those over the years, and that's actually a distinguishing feature of our Bedford congregation, to have a different cover every Sunday. And I'm going to describe the cover from that Sunday in 1992. It was a cartoon by Ruth Bragg, and it shows two folks standing on the grass talking, and overhead there are cloud headlines from the daily newspaper. And the daily newspaper says things like, Brazilian merchants hire death squads to kill children. No justice, no peace in Los Angeles. 13-year-olds turn to prostitution. 8-year-old arrested for drug running. Teens killed for status jackets. Shoes, Atlanta, Chicago, Boston, New York, Los Angeles. Famine in Somalia. 5,000 children die daily. Drive-by shootings. Ethnic cleansing. Death trains in Bosnia. Haitian refugees. It almost sounds like this morning's headlines. And then you've got the two folks talking to one another, and one asks the other, so how was your summer? And the other replies, well, we traded in the catch for a yawl. The Shar-Pei had 3 puppies, and our wine dealer says this year will be quite adequate. And yours? There you go. That's the cover from September 27th, 1992. And what I'm going to ask us to do is together, let me see your lips move. We're going to read the opening words titled The Little Deaths by Max Coots. Together. It's the little deaths before the final time, I fear. The blasé shrug that quietly replaces excited curiosity. The cynic sneer that takes the place of innocence. The soft, sweet odor of success that overcomes the sense of sympathy. The self-betrayals that rob us of our will to trust. The ridicule of vision, the barren blindness to what was once our sense of beauty. These are the deaths that come on so quietly, we do not know when it was we died. And now, with no further ado, and with thanks to Doug Muter for choosing this piece of suburban music, we're going to hear from our friends the Monkees and their well-known song, Pleasant Valley Sunday. Off we go, and I'll try to put the lyrics in the chat.
Rows of houses that are all Good morning, everyone. Well, I have to say that certainly wasn't the first parish choir singing that. It was a lot of fun. I'm going to ask, John had everyone wave, but I'm a sound person. So I'm going to ask that Delcy unmute everyone for just a second. And we're all going to say, hello, everyone. So there we go, everyone. Say it.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Okay, Delcy, you
Greetings
can turn
all.
off.
All right.
Good. Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy you're here. The sun is now starting to shine in the side window here. So if my face starts glowing, you'll know why. It's so good to see you. I've got a lot of announcements this morning, so I'll cut straight to the quick. So COVID-19 testing Tuesdays continue this Tuesday. New this week is a pilot testing of Bedford teachers from 7 to 9 a.m. at the church. Testing for all others will continue later in the morning. As usual, online registration is required for everyone. Go to the First Parish homepage, uubedford.org, and follow the links for COVID testing. Registration for this Tuesday will close at noon tomorrow, Monday, and then switch to registration for October 27th. More than 1,500 tests have been administered at the church. On Tuesday evening, we'll have a program on getting ready, the election and beyond. It's happening at 7:30 p.m. on Zoom. We'll be gathering to hear some framing from Maureen Riccici and Diana Feiner, who recently took an online course on nonviolent direct action. We will also reflect on our own spiritual, relational, and practical readiness, touch on congregational resources, and discuss how we can take action together in the couple weeks before November 3rd. So we'll be even more ready for whatever comes after. We will have our semi-annual congregational meeting of all members of the parish on Sunday, November 8th at 4 p.m. on Zoom. The warrant for the meeting has been posted and includes reports from ministers, staff, officers, and committees, including a status report from the task force on administrative staffing that is preparing for transitions in the church office in June. Upcoming is a music committee fundraiser. Janet Welby's husband, our own David Moore, is a well-respected painter, and he is being very generous in allowing his paintings to be sold by the music committee with the proceeds going to First Parish. A live viewing of those paintings is going to happen on October 31st, 1 to 4 p.m. And an auction will take place live on October 31st to November 7th. We'll send more details about that. Everything for the live viewing will be safe and controlled, and everything will be online for those who would prefer to see the paintings via that method. Today, after the postlude, we'll again have a 30 to 40 minute old-fashioned talkback discussion during the community hour. Everyone will be muted and then recognized and unmuted to comment on the themes of this morning's service. As usual, people can leave when they want, but all are welcome to participate. Don't forget, the First Parish Gift Shop is open today. John and others are at the church, and the Elm Street door will be unlocked until at least noon. And finally, We're so happy for everyone to be here, and especially those who are new to First Parish. We encourage newcomers to go to the church webpage, uubedford.org, and follow the newcomers link to stay in touch with contact information. And you know, today the chat is there and everyone's seeing comments come through for Ben's editorial. Feel free for anyone just to say hello to everyone in the chat. And you know what? That's it. So let's all now join together and say the unison affirmation together. Please sit or stand as you are able. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto. Vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en el amor y ayudamos los unos a los otros. Susan, take it away for joys and concerns.
Good morning. My name's Susan Lincoln, and I'm a member of the Lay Pastoral Care Team. And at this point, I'd like to invite you all to share your joys and concerns, if you like, with the rest of the congregation. And you can do that one of two ways. Yeah. Okay, so I'm lastly going to light a candle here for all those joys and concerns that you're sitting with quietly in your homes. Thank you.
Good morning, friends. Many of you have heard me say before that the UU office at the United Nations, formerly called the UNO, is our greatest tool to promote our UU sixth principle, the goal of world community with peace and justice for all. From its founding at the UN in 1962, the UU office there has led on issues critical to our faith community, such as world peace, human rights, justice through the power, and equal justice through the power of this international institution. The UN, for all its inadequacies, foibles, and sometimes outright failures, is the singular world structure that provides a meeting place with universally accepted procedures for decision-making and action. This year is the 75th anniversary of its founding, and the UU office at the UN, in collaboration with the UUA and the Canadian Unitarian Council, are commemorating this extraordinary event. Now, the UU office came into being at the UN in 1962 through the extraordinary efforts of Reverend Homer Jack and the support of his friend, US Ambassador Adlai Stevenson, who incidentally was a UU. The two were convinced that Unitarian Universalism needed a voice at the table of global decision-making. From that time forward, the director of the office at the UU office at the United Nations, first Homer Jack and now Bruce Knotts, has served as chair of the NGO First Committee. And that's the committee that deals with global security issues. Additionally, Bruce has served as co-chair of the Executive Council of the over 1,000 non-governmental organizations that have consultative status at the UN. One of the many programs of particular interest to us here at First Parish has been the UU office annual intergenerational spring seminar. This annual 3-day residential event brings together adult and youth UUs from across the country and Canada to learn about critical global issues and how these can be addressed through local actions. In each of the past 4 years, First Parish has sent a team of senior youth and adult sponsors to this event in New York City, including last spring at the outbreak of the COVID-19. We did so virtually through an intensive 3-day online conference. I am also joined by senior youth Liv Evans in our capacity, and I should put on my United Nations hat here, as First Parish envoys to the UU office at the United Nations to promote understanding and support of the UN here in our congregation. This Thursday, October 22nd at 6 o'clock in the evening, there will be an online celebration of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, led by our UU office at the UN. It will feature presentations by UUA President Susan Gray, Reverend Alicia Ford, the director of the UUA International Office, and of course, Bruce Knotts, and dignitaries from throughout the United Nations. I am putting a registration link in the chat, and we'll email this link out over the analyst after service. Even in the midst of this terrible pandemic, election turmoil, and the struggle for justice and Black lives, I hope you will find time to join us and remember we have a sixth principle, and to work together to promote the goal of world community with peace and justice for all. Thanks.
Thank you, Jerry. That brings me to remind everyone as to why we love being part of this community. First Parish is a very special place, and it holds a lot of those ideals that we hold so dear. It puts them out there. It doesn't just sit and hold it amongst ourselves, we share it with each other, and we love sharing it with the world. Now is the time where we can show our appreciation. It is never free. It is never easy to do what we need to do. It always costs something. And so I would like to encourage you to support First Parish. We're going to show you some information while the music is playing, and please respond. And let's make sure that our community has something to tell the world, and make sure that we show our appreciation of that. I'd like to talk about the music that's going to be behind the offering today. When COVID-19 hit, it truly disabled the music community in a way that, as a freelance musician, both psychologically and financially has been, frankly, crippling. We have yet to recover from that, but back in May, that's what people were talking about. They were talking about how musicians, in fact, were affected, how things like orchestras, the BSO, the Met, all the small orchestras around the Boston area were no longer playing, and it meant musicians were losing their livelihood. And then we had the George Floyd incident in response to Black Lives Matter. And I was talking to some of my friends, specifically at the Four Strings Academy, which is managed by Mariana Greenhill. And I said, I'd like for you to provide some music for a service at First Parish. We would like some musicians who were Black, who could demonstrate to us and remind us that it's not just us, it's them as well. And so Mariana and a fellow violinist, Keith Sanders, got together and put together some videos of music. One will be the postlude, and the next video will be a hymn medley. And I said, pick something out of your own faith tradition. And so they've picked hymns out of their tradition, specifically for this medley. We have Great Is Thy Faithfulness, He Paid It All, and The Old Rugged Cross. Enjoy what they have to offer to give us.
So everyone, thank you so much, Brad, and thank you to Mariana and to Keith as well. If you're wondering why I'm preaching yet again about the suburbs, all you have to do is look at the lead story today on CNN. There is a headline that blares, "Trump continues bizarre appeals to suburban women voters." The suburbs are a focus for both parties. They are the dominant part. The suburbs are the dominant part of our electorate. And I've always had a curiosity about the nature of the suburbs and our relationship to other adjoining communities and to the metropolitan area. And again, 28 years ago, I preached two sermons on this subject, and it strikes me that in some ways, at least, they remain relevant, and in other ways, they presage things that became a focus for my ministry. How to build community, for example, here at First Parish, inclusive community that is not simply inward looking, but is outward looking. And yet, we all have to admit that the suburbs are often the source of much derision. And here we have a small piece of doggerel by the writer Judith Viorst. She says, "With 4 walk-in closets to walk in, 3 bushes, 2 shrubs, and 1 tree, the suburbs are good for the children, but no place for the grown-ups to be." And with that, we're again going to hear the classic little boxes. 2 weeks ago, we heard Pete Seeger version of this Malvina Reynolds hit, and now is another version of Little Boxes. Take it away. So here we are again, folks. And 2 weeks ago, I told you that 28 years ago, when I preached that sermon, there was a smoking barbecue grill on the chancel. And now I want you to use your imagination because, again, 28 years ago, I placed a lawnmower on the chancel platform, and there was also 1 lawn chair and a cardboard model of a suburban house and yard. Prompted by the economic decline of both our cities and our farms, and hastened by the automobile and by new high technology industry, the suburbs emerged in the 1940s and 50s as something new on the American scene. Bedford, Acton, Chelmsford, and most of the towns where we live were no longer stable rural villages. At first, they were changing, but still familiar. Grandparents might still live in the city or in the country nearby, and Dad might still walk to town, from which he could then commute to the city by train or even streetcar. This calls for a new side comment. You know, don't you, that the diagonal path across the common from the wayside pulpit at Elm Street to the corner of South Road and Maple Streets, that was originally the footpath made by our parishioner George Blinn in the 1920s as he walked back and forth from his house on the Great Road to the train depot where he commuted to and from Boston. Now you know. In those days, I'm now continuing, one could still see one's neighbors or friends at the pharmacy, the hardware store, or the restaurant in town center. There were lots of restaurants in Bedford in those days, by the way. I collect matchbooks from them. One of them advertised food like Mother Tried to Cook. And another restaurant had an airplane perched on its roof. You just ask Sharon McDonald, our church and town historian. But I digress. And with babies booming and women simultaneously unencumbered and discouraged from working, mothers made houses into homes, remember homemakers, and developments into neighborhoods. In some ways, at least, the suburbs were the best of all possible worlds, and people swarmed to their success. And yet we know what happened. Education and economics took some of us thousands of miles from parents and grandparents. The streetcar and train service deteriorated and were discontinued. Main Street clogged with muscle cars, and God save you should you ride a bicycle. CVS, Bradley's, McDonald's, and the mall replaced the small businesses of town center. Pharmacy was certainly still needed because the three best-selling drugs in the country became an ulcer medication, Tagamet, a hypertension drug, Inderol, and a tranquilizer, Valium. Women joined the workforce by choice and by necessity, and latchkey children became a new phenomenon, and the neighborhoods became much lonelier places. In some ways, at least, the suburbs in the 70s and 80s were the worst of all possible worlds. And to the rural communes and to the gentrified city, some fled the suburban failure. Here is another contemporary aside. Just this week, I received a heart-wrenching, horrible email from a man who is now my age or a bit older, who grew up gay or bisexual in Bedford and who suffered the life-shattering consequences from which he still has not recovered. Yes, Bedford and suburbia could be a lonely place. And what of the Church of Suburbia? Just as the suburbs themselves were or were thought to be fresh and different and hopeful in the 1950s, so too the church was a happy but homogenized and brainless sort of place. As president, Ike said it best: every American ought to have a faith to live by, and I don't care what it is. Protestant Church Council advised its suburban pastors, subject matter should project love, joy, courage, hope, faith, trust in God, goodwill. Avoid condemnation, criticism, controversy, sell the good news. The training of Christians on cross-bearing, forsaking all else, sacrifice, and service is out of place. As apostles, extend an invitation. Come and enjoy our privileges, meet good friends, and see what God can do for you. Maybe play a round of golf while you're at it. The Unitarians and Universalists went along with and resisted the suburban tide. Most of our urban churches closed and moved to the suburbs. Contrastingly, in the late 1940s, the Universalists, whose national headquarters were in Boston, realized that there was not a single Universalist church left in all of Boston. Embarrassed, their board bought, remodeled, and subsidized a new church, the Charles Street Meeting House on Charles Street in Beacon Hill, a church whose architecture, by the way, was copied when this, our first parish building, was built in 1818. The Charles Street Meeting House flourished for a while in the 1950s, but finally it too closed, and it is now, you shall see, condominiums. Despite a few exceptions, Unitarian Universalism became an overwhelmingly suburban religion. We were as materialist as any suburban church a generation ago, or even more so, as reflected in the joke I assume you know about the man who wanted his Alfa Romeo blessed. One after another, the man visited the Presbyterian, Episcopal, Catholic, Congregational, Baptist, and Methodist clergy, and each responded, "A blessing? Sure, but what's an Alfa Romeo?" Desperate, the man sought out the local Unitarian minister. "An Alfa Romeo," the minister exulted. "I love Alfa Romeos, but what is a blessing?" And yet, however materialist, suburban Unitarians certainly resisted the brainless conformist tag. There is the oft-told comment that when confronted by the sign with two arrows, this way to heaven, this way to a discussion of heaven, Unitarians invariably opt for the discussion. But that was then, and this is now. What I want to suggest this morning is that some of the old stereotypes and judgments no longer apply. The suburbs are not islands of idyllic prosperity. They are not prisons of conformity. They are a place like any other place with assets and deficits. The suburbs are neither to be loved nor loathed. No longer are we so self-righteous, neither need we be self-contemptuous. Most of us seek blessings even more so than Alfa Romeos, and at least some of us would take heaven any day over a discussion, though probably a discussion in heaven would be perfect. After sketching an overview of the suburbs 2 Sundays ago, I promised to attempt a suburban contextual theology today, an answer to the question, what is the distinctive gift that this place can make to religious understanding? Frankly, it is easier to ask the question than answer it, but here goes. My theology has 3 tenets. It is a Trinitarian theology: access, abundance, and privacy. Each is a mixed blessing. The first overarching feature of suburban life is that we have unique access geographically, economically, politically, educationally, socially. What we want is within our reach, more so in the suburbs than anywhere else. Just like that new sign on Carlisle Road, rural charm within reach. The financial district and fruitlands are equidistant. There are days when I decide whether to have lunch at the Cambodian restaurant in Lowell or to picnic at Great Meadow. Jobs may not be plentiful or secure, but there are more here than anywhere. Great schools are here. Fewer and fewer suburbanites take advantage, but there is access to the city for education, employment, culture. Access is synonymous with freedom, and the suburbs are freely endowed. Here too, I must add a new comment. Geographically, we are accessible so long as one has transportation. There's the rub. Abundance is the second tenet of my suburban theology. When Globe columnist Linda Weltner spoke here 2 weeks ago, that was in 1992, she concluded by saying that the myth of having it all is a myth because, in fact, we already have all that we need. It was a quintessential suburban conclusion. I don't think it would be accepted anywhere else. Here, however, it's right as rain. We do have all that is needed for our fulfillment in body, mind, or spirit, and then some in skills and leadership and human and natural resources, in money and in things. There is more here than anywhere. Now, the third tenet of this suburban theology is privacy. One can have anonymity in the city and solitude in the country, but the suburbs are a bastion of privacy. 2 weeks ago, I noted that private property was the reason for suburbs in the first place, a home of one's own. Privacy goes further than prosperity, however. The suburbs give privacy to individuals and to families, but government too is a private enterprise in the sense that it is closely held by its constituents and accountable only to those within the suburban town lines. We have our own schools, our own security services, our own maintenance personnel. We take care of our own. I say this not in jest or derision because I believe in privacy. Privacy is synonymous with individualism and with decentralized authority and with grassroots democracy. But now, here too is the rub. Each of these suburban assets carries obligations. Let's start with access, our freedom to choose. Really, it is use it or lose it. I have trouble describing this, so let me tell a story. Last week, there was a social responsibility committee meeting. Again, I was speaking in 1992. As you know, out of it came our new focus on hunger, which we hope will generate a number of actions, the first of which will be our commitment to cook and serve a meal at our local feeding program, the Community Table. It is a small beginning in the global effort to end hunger, but it is a beginning nonetheless. Like a lot of meetings, the one last week had a lot of, we could do this, but then again, we could do that, and then again, there's this. Much discussion, not a lot of action, but some. After the meeting, I talked with Marcia, and that was Marcia Payson, our RE director at the time. And Marcia mused about her 30-some years of experience in UU churches. Like most groups, she said, they did a lot of hand-wringing. It is a rare group which is so immersed in the reality of need that they know precisely what to do and just do it. When one is free to choose, one is also free to wring one's hands. Our privileged access must be exercised or it will shrivel to inconsequence. The suburbs are places where we have access to a lot of strings that could be pulled in the service of our values, strings to people and to power, strings that too frequently are limp and untouched. And then there is the obligation of our abundance. No sermon is more overpreached and more underpracticed, so I'll be brief on this one. Things are in the saddle and ride humanity, said Emerson, one of Concord's more bourgeois sons. There was a time, you know, when every minister preached about voluntary simplicity, and now I read many sermons about the politics of relinquishment, and they make perfect sense. Relinquish our covetous and consumptive ways. Relinquish our fierce individualism and replace it with compassionate mutuality. But for all the talk of relinquishment, I don't see many people giving up very much. You go first, we seem to say. No, after you. No, after you. Taxes to suburbanites are what Krypton was to Superman. But now he's dead and our entitlements remain unscathed. And yet, despite my cynicism, I believe that the right calls to relinquishment can be willingly heard. The 1950s Church of Suburbia advised against preaching sacrifice, cross-bearing, and the like. Perhaps that is why that church is dead. From my own generation's perspective, I know there is an unfulfilled yearning for sacrifice and for service. And there is another way to look at abundance. Leadership, for example, is nothing more than having something left over after taking care of oneself. A suburban theology accepts the opportunity and the obligation of abundance. Here, once again, I must interject from the year 2020. What I said in 1992 has the perfumed whiff, I think, of noblesse oblige. From those to whom much has been given, much is expected. True enough. Nevertheless, our privilege, that is a word I wasn't using in 1992, our privilege must not give us a place at the head of any line. If anything, our privilege carries the obligation to step back, to honor and to accept the leadership of marginalized persons, those who have been most impacted by systemic injustices. Continuing again with the original 28-year-old sermon, privacy carries its obligations also. Its underside is isolation and exclusion. Isolation in that suburbia permits, even encourages a certain disconnection with ordinary social intercourse. Exclusion in that we sometimes erect barriers to exclude those who are judged different by race, by class, by sexual orientation, by ability or disability, by most any silly category we can think up. Thus, the opportunity and obligation of this suburban theology is that we open ourselves to the hands-on, face-to-face experience of difference. Here, my thinking has been influenced by a wonderful book I mentioned in our discussion, a book titled The Great Good Place by Ray Oldenburg and subtitled Cafes, Coffee Shops, Community Centers, Beauty Parlors, General Stores, Bars, Hangouts, and How They Get You Through the Day. It is the best applied theology I've ever read. For a long time, a friend and I have joked about opening the first Unitarian Universalist laundromat. And I am pleased to discover it's no joke. This book is about what are called third places, not home, not work, but a place where diverse and differing people gather to put aside the concerns of work and home and simply hang out for the pleasures of good company and lively conversation. Folks, do you remember when we used to do that sort of thing? I said, they are the heart of a community's social vitality, the grassroots of a democracy, and they are a diminishing aspect of American social landscape. Simone de Beauvoir once said that the thing she missed most in America was the decline of the drugstore. Not the CVSs, but the drugstores that were also cafes and refuges. Here is another woman's recollection of a drugstore. I grew up in a small industrial town just outside Akron. I was born in 1933. Long before I started to school, my dad would take me along on his every evening walk down to the corner for a Coke. It was a ritual. During the course of the years, the owners changed, one pharmacist selling out, another coming in, but the soda fountain remained. It functioned as the gathering place for the neighborhood men who didn't frequent the bar across the street. Neighborhood women came in, made purchases, and went out. The men gathered to talk. I was usually the only child sitting on the high stool, sipping a cherry Coke or a lemon Coke, happy to be there with my dad. The adult I've become has often looked back upon the corner as a strong formative force in my life. I can't be quite certain, but I believe it was there that I early became aware that the world was much wider than Barkerton, Ohio, that there was a city, state, and national government, that what happened in government affected people's lives, and that people participated in government. I suspect that it was all those conversations overheard at the drugstore that made me feel comfortable with conversations about ideas, and at home with man talk as well as with woman talk over the kitchen tables of the neighborhood. I suspect that it was at the corner that the roots were planted for a lifetime interest in politics, economics, and philosophy, none of which were part of the world at home, but which were the core of this third place. Okay, I suppose this lets the cat out of the bag. One day, your minister is featured in the newspaper as a home brewer. That, by the way, actually happened in 1992. And the next, your minister wants to turn the church into a tavern or a laundromat or a drugstore. Community building is what it's about. Actually, this brings me back to the lame, a word I used in 1992 and would not use today. The joke about that discussion of heaven. Because of our access, because of our abundance, and because of our yearning for a community beyond our private selves, we in the suburbs are in a unique position to rekindle the art of conversation. So far, we limit our discussion to a half hour on Sunday mornings. What would it be like for us to initiate more conversations? This is the sort of thing that I say presages future developments in our church life and in our ministry. Revelation, says the theologian James Luther Adams, revelation in our tradition happens in the human encounter of conversation. Remember that the next time someone asks you for your views on Revelation. We need not be grandiose. I'll be specific. The ice cream social we sponsored back in 1992 on the Common last summer gave a taste of what a vital town common might be. It's something we should do again. People came here and actually told me they were surprised to discover that this church is not dead. Linda Weltner's lecture here was another example. We could be the catalyst for community conversation, public forums, debates, conversations about what it means to be a community. I have an idea. What would it take to get kids hanging out on the common again, eh? Or to get us hanging out there? I really want to brainstorm these possibilities with you. What would it take for more people to come here just to talk and be together? Here's another contemporary reflection. There was a news story just a couple of days ago that applications for new patents and new inventions have plunged during the pandemic. Without third places for people to meet and schmooze and exchange ideas, creativity has been lost. Our calling as a congregation, our calling on this privileged town common is to bring people together. Children, adults, single people, those who need much and those who have much to give. Talk is our theological imperative. Maybe you think we are all talk, and if so, I think we should go with our strength. For better or worse, I believe that for us, talk is a prerequisite for and concomitant with action. The trick is to engage in meaningful conversation, not just aimless talk. A suburban theology is a hard thing to imagine, and I don't think Harvard is ever going to invite me back to lecture on theology. But we do have some assets: access, abundance, privacy, and we do have some obligations. Exercising our access, sacrifice and serving from our abundance, and reaching out beyond our private precincts. And we sure can talk. Well, why not finish up with a bit of grandiosity? Ray Bradbury once wrote a critique of suburbia in which he referred to juggernaut shopping malls, which smother and crush the real places. But instead of building high altars to consumerism, Bradbury urged that we invent a people machine. He said, what are we talking about? Not just a shopping center where people come to buy one sheet, one shirt, or one shoe, but a place where lingering, staying, dawdling, socializing are a way of life. Refuge from the big city, or sometimes worse, your own parlor. A place so incredibly right that mobs will rush to it crying, "Sanctuary," and be allowed in forever. A place in some where people can come to be people. This idea, Ray Bradbury says, is as old as Athens at high noon, Rome soon after supper, Paris at dawn, Alexandria at dusk, or the first parish in Bedford at about 11:15 on Sunday morning. May we be a place where people can be people. Remember those days? We yearn for them still. Amen, and may it be so. And let's take it away with our postlude.
John, take it away.
Well, I would like to reiterate the slide that's up. Thanks to everybody that made all of this possible, including you, Brad, and arranging for the wonderful music. People in the chat have commented about how soothing it is, and you know, in a funny sort of nostalgic way, I hope that the sermon as well and the entire service is soothing and reminds us of what we can be, and how wonderful it will be when we have live music. And again, when we're all in there making coffee and cleaning up that darn kitchen. So good to be with everybody.